Par 504. The bees, the drones, and the wasp. High in an oak tree, the bees had built their honeycombs. The idle drones claimed these combs as their own. The dispute was brought to court, with a wasp as judge. The wasp, familiar with both species, proposed this to the parties. Your bodies are similar, and your colours match, making this truly a difficult case. To avoid any hasty judgment, take these hives and fill them with wax cells. The honey's taste and the comb's shape will reveal who truly made the honeycombs in question. The drones refused this proposal, but the bees eagerly accepted. The wasp then delivered this verdict: "It's clear who cannot make honeycombs and who can. Therefore, I return to the bees the fruits of their labour." I would have passed over this fable in silence had the drones not refused to honour the agreement. 505. Aesop and the Bow. One day in Athens, a man saw Aesop playing marbles with a group of boys. He stopped and laughed at Aesop, thinking the old man had lost his mind. Aesop, who preferred to laugh at others rather than be laughed at, noticed this. He took an unstrung bow and placed it in the middle of the road. "Hey, wise guy," Aesop called out, "explain what I just did." A crowd gathered around them. The man thought hard for a long time but couldn't figure out the answer to Aesop's challenge. Finally, he gave up. Having won this battle of wits, Aesop explained, "If you keep a bow tightly strung all the time, it will soon break. But if you let it rest, it will be ready for use whenever you need it." Aesop continued, "In the same way, the mind needs occasional amusement. This allows you to think more clearly when you return to serious matters." 506. The Dog and the Lamb among the Goats. A dog saw a lamb bleating among the goats and said, "You fool, your mother is not here." The dog pointed to a flock of sheep grazing in the distance. "I do not want that mother," said the lamb. "She conceives when it pleases her, carries the unknown burden for several months, and finally just drops it on the ground. But I want the mother who gives me her udder, who even takes milk away from her own children so that I do not go hungry." "But the one who gave birth to you is more important," said the dog. "Not true," replied the lamb. "What great favour was it for her to bring me into this world when I could expect the butcher at any moment? How could she even know whether I would be born black or white? And if she wanted a girl, what would she have thought of me, since I am a boy? Since she had no control over my conception, why should I prefer her over the one who took pity on me and freely gave me her love? Parents are determined by love, not fate." 507. The Cricket and the Owl. A cricket was making a lot of noise, which greatly disturbed the owl. The owl was used to hunting for food in the darkness of night and resting during the day inside a hollow tree branch. She asked the cricket to be quiet, but the cricket only made even more noise. The owl asked again, but the cricket's noise grew louder. Realizing her efforts were useless as the cricket ignored her requests, the owl decided to deceive the noisy insect. "Since I cannot sleep because of your singing," said the owl, "which one might mistake for the sweet strains of Apollo's lyre, I've decided to drink some of the nectar that Athena recently gave me as a gift. If you don't mind, come and drink with me." The cricket, feeling very thirsty and flattered by the owl's compliments, happily flew to where the owl was waiting. The owl then sealed the entrance and caught the trembling cricket, ending her life. What the cricket had refused to do while alive, she now granted in death. Those who do not treat others with respect often face the consequences of their arrogance. 508. The Gods and Their Trees. Once upon a time, the gods chose the trees they wanted to adopt as their own. Jupiter selected the oak, Venus the myrtle, Apollo the laurel, Cybele the pine, and Hercules the tall poplar. Minerva was surprised and asked why they had chosen trees that bore no fruit. Jupiter explained, "We don't want it to seem like we're giving these honours in exchange for their fruit." "For heaven's sake," Minerva replied, "you can say whatever you want, both, but I prefer the olive tree because of the fruit it produces." Then Jupiter, the father of gods and creator of mankind, said, "My daughter, you are rightly called wise by everyone. Public praise is foolish unless we can create something useful." The moral of the story: don't do anything that doesn't serve a purpose. Note, the god's name is Roman because the Latin original was translated in the absence of a Greek text. 509. Juno and the Peacock. The peacock came to see Juno, upset that the goddess had not given him the song of the nightingale. The peacock complained that the nightingale's song was wonderful to everyone, but as soon as he made any sound, everyone laughed at him. Juno, wanting to comfort the peacock, said, "You are superior in beauty and size. There is an emerald shine around your neck, and your tail is a fan of jewels and colourful feathers." The peacock protested, "What is the point of this silent beauty if I am defeated by the sound of my own voice?" Juno replied, "Your lot in life has been assigned by the fates. You have been given beauty, the eagle has strength, the nightingale has song, the raven has prophetic signs, and the crow has omens. Each is content with their own gifts. Don't chase after what you haven't been given, so your disappointed hopes don't turn into complaints." 5:10. Aesop and his lamp. Once, Aesop was the only slave in his master's house. He was asked to prepare dinner earlier than usual and needed to search several houses for fire to light his lamp. Finally, he found a place where he could light it. His journey had taken him on a winding path. To save time on the return, he decided to go straight through the forum. In the crowd, a talkative man shouted, "Aesop, why are you carrying a lamp in broad daylight?" Aesop replied, "I'm looking for a real man." As he hurried home, if that bothersome person had thought for a moment, he would have realized that Aesop didn't consider him a man at all, but just a nuisance, disturbing someone who had more important things to do. 5:11. The Mice and the Weasel. You might think I'm just kidding around, and it's true, I'm having fun with a light touch, not dealing with anything too serious. But you should pay close attention to these little stories. Sometimes small things hold great value. Appearances can be misleading. People often misjudge based on first impressions, and it takes a sharp mind to recognize something hidden in an unexpected corner. Anyway, I've been talking too much without offering anything for you to take away, so let me give you a fable, the story of the weasel and the mice. An old weasel, weakened by age, couldn't catch the quick mice anymore. So, she decided to cover herself in flour and lay in a dark corner of the house, pretending to be dead. One mouse, thinking she was something to eat, jumped at her, only to be caught and killed. Another did the same, and a third met the same fate. After a few more mice fell into the trap, a particularly old and experienced mouse arrived. He had escaped many traps and snares in his time. Seeing the weasel lying in the corner, he immediately recognized the trap. "You there, lying in the corner," he called out. "I'll believe you're made of flour, if that's really what you are." 5:12. The Mother and Her 3 Daughters. Sometimes one person is more clever than a crowd, as this story will show. A certain man, upon his death, left 3 daughters. One daughter was beautiful and always chasing after men with her eyes. Another was a frugal, hard-working woman who spent her time spinning wool. The third daughter was ugly and spent all her time drinking. The old man made the mother of the girls his heir, with the condition that she distribute his fortune equally among the 3 daughters, but under 2 specific rules. First, that they should neither possess nor enjoy what was given to them, and second, that once they had given up the property, each must give 100,000 sesterces to their mother. The news spread through Athens, and the mother consulted many expert lawyers, but none of them could explain how the daughters could not possess what they received, or how they could give their mother the required sum if they had nothing. A great deal of time passed with no answers, so the mother, tired of waiting, decided to ignore the legal advice and rely on common sense. She gave the beautiful daughter the clothing, jewels, and all the luxuries, including silver pitchers and eunuchs. She gave the hard-working daughter the fields, flocks, country estate, farm workers, cattle, draft animals, and farming tools. To the drinking daughter, she gave a cellar full of wine, a fine house, and beautiful gardens. Just as the mother was about to give the items to each daughter with the approval of the townspeople who knew them well, Aesop appeared and stopped the proceedings. If the father knew what was happening, Aesop said, he would be turning in his grave, seeing how the Athenians have misunderstood his will. The people, curious, asked Aesop to explain. He explained that the gifts should be distributed as follows. The spinstress should receive the house with its lovely gardens and the wine cellar. The drinker should get the clothes, jewels, and attendants, and the beautiful but frivolous daughter should receive the fields and flocks. None of them will be able to tolerate what is not suited to their nature, Aesop continued. The ugly daughter will sell the jewels to buy more wine, the promiscuous daughter will sell the fields to buy trinkets, and the hard-working daughter will sell the estate to fund her lifestyle. In this way, no daughter will possess what was given to her, and each will eventually pay their mother the required amount from the sale of the property. Thus, Aesop's wit solved what many had failed to understand. 513. The Thief and the Lamp. A thief went to Jupiter's altar and used its flame to light his lamp. Then, by the light of the god's own fire, he robbed the altar. As he left, carrying the stolen goods, a voice suddenly spoke. It was Holy Religion herself. She said, "Although these gifts were offered by wicked men and I despise them, so their theft does not upset me, you will still pay with your life when the time for your punishment comes. But to prevent this sacred fire from guiding criminals in the future, I forbid any use of this flame for evil purposes. That's why, to this day, no one may light a lamp from the sacred fire of the gods, nor use a lamp to rekindle it. The author alone, who created this story, can explain all the lessons it teaches. First, it shows that those whom you support may later turn out to be your enemies. Second, it shows that crimes are not punished by the wrath of the gods, but by the decree of fate. Finally, it teaches that good people must avoid associating with wrongdoers. 514. The Monkey and the Lion's Breath. When the animals chose the mighty lion as their king, he wanted to earn a good reputation. So he abandoned his old ways, swore never to harm the other creatures, and vowed to uphold justice with honesty. But over time, he grew weary of this restraint. Unable to change his nature, he devised a trick. He would take animals aside one by one and ask if his breath smelled bad. If they said it did, he killed them. If they said it did not, he killed them all the same. In this way, he satisfied his hunger. After many had perished, the lion summoned the monkey and asked the same question. The monkey replied, "Your breath smells sweeter than cinnamon, like the altars of the gods." The lion was pleased by the flattery. Too ashamed to kill the monkey outright, he came up with another plan. Pretending to be ill, the lion called for doctors. When they examined him and found his pulse normal, they prescribed a light meal to ease his stomach. "A king may eat as he pleases," the lion said, "and I have never tasted monkey before." No sooner said than done. The monkey was killed at once, and the lion ate his fill. Speaking is a punishment, and silence is a torment. 515. Prometheus and Bacchus. Someone asked Aesop why lesbians and gay men existed. The old storyteller explained, it all goes back to Prometheus, the creator of our fragile human clay. One day, Prometheus was crafting genitals separately. As he prepared to attach them to the right bodies, Bacchus suddenly invited him to dinner. Prometheus returned home late, stumbling and full of heavenly wine. In his drunken, sleepy state, he mistakenly put female genitals on male bodies and male parts on females. This is why some now find pleasure in unconventional desires. 5516. Jupiter and the Goats. When the female goats convinced Jupiter to give them beards, the male goats grew upset and began to complain. They said that now the women had the same dignity as they did. Jupiter replied, "Let them enjoy this vain source of pride and claim the badges of your office as long as they can't match your strength. Let this remind you to tolerate those who wear the same uniform, even if they aren't as strong or brave as you." Have 5517. Jupiter and the Dogs. Once upon a time, the dogs sent ambassadors to Jupiter to ask him to improve their lives. They wanted him to save them from being mistreated by humans, who fed them nothing but bread full of bran and made them satisfy their hunger with filthy scraps. The ambassadors set out on their journey, but they were slow, sniffing for food in manure piles and not even responding when called. Mercury found them with great difficulty and dragged them up to heaven. The dogs were wild with excitement, but when they saw the face of mighty Jupiter, they became terrified and covered the palace floor with excrement. Jupiter chased them out with clubs, but he would not let them leave. Back home, the other dogs wondered why their ambassadors hadn't returned. Eventually, they concluded that the mission had failed embarrassingly, so they sent new ambassadors. After some time, they learned of their predecessors' disastrous performance and feared a repeat. So this time they filled their ambassadors' behinds with perfume. The new ambassadors were sent off, and as soon as they arrived in heaven, they were granted an audience. Jupiter, the supreme father of the gods, sat down and shook his thunderbolt, causing the universe to tremble. The dogs, startled by the sudden noise, promptly pooped, mixing their waste with the perfume. The gods were outraged and demanded that the dogs be punished. Jupiter then spoke before issuing his punishment. A king cannot refuse an ambassador's departure, and it's not hard to decide a fitting penalty. But this prank must be punished. I will not stop them from leaving, but I condemn them to starvation, so they can no longer lose control of their bowels. And those who sent such incompetent ambassadors will always be ridiculed by mankind. As a result, dogs today are still wary of new dogs. Whenever they meet a strange dog, they take a sniff of its behind. 518. The Fox and the Dragon. A fox, while digging her den, burrowed deeper and deeper into the ground. Eventually, she came across the cave of a dragon who was guarding a hidden treasure. When the fox saw the dragon, she said, "First, I apologize for my carelessness. Secondly, you must realize that gold means nothing to me. So I ask you kindly, what benefit do you gain from this work? What reward is so great that you would forgo sleep and live out your life here in the darkness?" The dragon replied, "I have no reward. This task was assigned to me by Jupiter above." "Does that mean you take nothing for yourself and give nothing to anyone?" the fox asked. "Yes, that is what the fates have decreed," the dragon answered. "Please do not be angry if I speak freely," the fox said. "It seems to me that someone who lives like this must have been born under an unlucky star. Since you will soon depart to the place where those before you have gone, why do you torment yourself, blind to the truth?" the fox continued. "You, the miser, who rejoice at the future inheritance of your heirs, yet deprive the gods of incense and yourself of food. You, who are gloomy when you hear the music of the lyre, and suffer when the joyful sound of the flute reaches your ears. You, who groan at the cost of food and save every penny for your estate, burdening heaven with false promises. You even cut back on funeral expenses to ensure that not even Libitina, the goddess of undertakers, will profit from your death." 519. Simonides and the Shipwreck. A learned man always has riches within himself. Simonides, the famous poet of lyric poems, found a way to support himself by travelling through the major cities of Asia, praising victorious athletes in exchange for money. After making a fortune from this, he was ready to set sail back to his homeland, born, as they say, on the island of Chios. He boarded a ship, but a terrible storm, combined with the ship's old age, caused it to sink in the middle of the sea. Some passengers grabbed their money belts, others held on to their valuables, hoping they might survive. One passenger, more curious than the others, asked the poet, "Simonides, why aren't you taking any of your things?" He replied, "All that is mine is right here with me." It turned out that only a few managed to swim ashore, while most drowned, weighed down by the things they were carrying. Then bandits arrived, took whatever the survivors had brought ashore, and left them naked. Fortunately, the ancient city of Clazomenae was nearby, and the shipwrecked people made their way there. In this city there was a man who loved literature and had read Simonides' works many times. He admired him from afar, and when he heard Simonides speak, he immediately recognized him and invited him to his house. He gave him clothes, money, and servants to help him recover. The rest of the survivors, however, wandered around with placards, begging for food. When Simonides saw them, he said, "As I said, all that is mine is right here with me, but all that you took with you has now vanished." 520. Mountain in Labour. A mountain was in labour, groaning loudly. Great expectations spread across the land as the people waited eagerly, but in the end the mountain gave birth to a mouse. This is a tale for those who make grand threats but achieve nothing. The Ant and the Fly. The ant and the fly argued fiercely about who was more important. The fly spoke first. "How can you compare yourself to my exalted status? I spend time at altars and wander through God's temples. At sacrifices, I'm the first to taste the entrails. I can sit on the king's head if I wish and enjoy forbidden kisses from married women. I don't work, yet I enjoy the best spoils. What in your life compares to mine, you country bumpkin? The ant replied, It's wonderful to dine at the gods' table, but only for invited guests, not for those they despise. You visit their altars? Yes, but you're driven away immediately. You boast of kings and women's kisses? That's shameful to mention. If you don't work, it's no surprise you have nothing when in need. I diligently store grain for winter, while you feed on wallside manure. When cold winds kill you, I'm safe in my well-stocked home. You provoke me in summer, but in winter you're silent. That should deflate your pride. This fable distinguishes between those who boast of empty deeds and those with solid accomplishments. 522. Simonides and the Twin Gods. As I have already discussed the great value people place on learning, now I will share how greatly learning is honoured by the gods. This is another story about Simonides, whom I have spoken of before. In exchange for an agreed-upon fee, the poet Simonides was hired to write a victory ode for a certain boxer. He sought out a quiet place to write, but the poor subject matter hindered his creative inspiration. As a result, Simonides relied on the usual poetic license and included the gods Castor and Pollux in his poem. He alluded to the fame the twin sons of Leda had achieved in boxing. Simonides' client praised the work, but only paid him 1/3 of the agreed fee. When Simonides asked for the rest, the patron said, Let the twins pay the rest, since their praise occupies 2/3 of the poem. But of course I don't want people to think you left in anger, so please agree to come to dinner tonight. I've invited my relatives and I want you to join us. Although Simonides had been cheated and was upset, he agreed to come, not wanting to part on bad terms and damage his reputation. When the dinner hour came, Simonides arrived. The feast was lively, filled with wine and cheer, and the house echoed with the joy of the banquet. Suddenly, 2 young men appeared. They were covered in dust and sweat, and their bodies were extraordinary, almost superhuman. They instructed one of the servants to call for Simonides, telling him to hurry, as it was an urgent matter. The startled servant woke Simonides, and the poet had barely moved a step from the dining room when the building suddenly collapsed, killing everyone inside. There were no young men to be found at the door. When word of the events spread, everyone realized that the gods had saved Simonides' life in exchange for the payment that was still owed to him. 523. Demetrius and Menander. King Demetrius of Phalerum had unlawfully seized control of Athens. As is the common custom, the people rushed in, competing with each other to salute the victor. The leading citizens kissed the hand that had captured them, while silently mourning the unfortunate change in their fate. Even the retired gentlemen and those who enjoyed leisure did not stay away, though they were the last to come, only to ensure their attendance was noted. Among them was Menander, famous for his comedies. Demetrius had read his works, and though he didn't know Menander personally, he admired his poetic talent. Menander arrived, covered in perfume and wearing flowing robes, walking with delicate, slow steps. When the king saw him at the end of the line, he asked, "Who is that fop, and how dare he strut about like that in my presence?" The men nearby answered, "That is Menander, the poet." Demetrius immediately softened and said, "Why, no man could be more handsome." 524. The 2 soldiers and the robber. 2 soldiers encountered a robber. One fled, while the other stood his ground and defended himself bravely. After the robber was driven off, the cowardly companion rushed back. He drew his sword and threw off his cloak, saying, "Let me at him. I'll make him regret attacking us." The soldier who had fought replied, "I wish you had helped with just those words earlier. I would have believed you and fought even harder. Now put away your sword and useless tongue. You might fool those who don't know you, but I've seen how quickly you run away. I know how unreliable your courage really is." This story applies to those who are brave when things are going well, but flee when the outcome is uncertain. 525. The Bald Man and the Fly. A fly repeatedly bit a bald man on his bare head. As the man tried to swat the fly, he ended up slapping himself hard. The fly laughed and said, "You're trying to kill me, a tiny insect, for a small bite. What will you do to yourself now that you've added injury to insult?" The bald man replied, "I can easily forgive myself, knowing I didn't intend to hurt myself. But you, vile creature from a despicable race that delights in human blood, I'd gladly get rid of you even at greater cost to myself." This story shows that accidental harm should be forgiven, while intentional harm deserves full punishment. 526. The Pig, the Donkey, and the Barley. A man had made a vow to sacrifice a pig to Hercules if the god helped him out of danger. After fulfilling his vow, he ordered that the leftover barley from the pig be given to the donkey. However, the donkey refused to touch it. "I would normally enjoy this food," the donkey said, "but not when it comes from the pig, who was slaughtered after eating it." This story made me cautious, and I have avoided risky ventures ever since. But you say, those who grab wealth get to keep it. Remember how many of them are eventually caught and punished. The ones who are punished make up the larger group. A few might profit from reckless actions, but many more are ruined by them. Note, Helios is a first-generation sun god in Greek mythology, representing the sun and driving it across the sky each day. Apollo, though also associated with the sun in later traditions, is primarily known as the god of music, prophecy, and medicine. While some traditions equate Apollo with Helios, Apollo's role in myth is broader, and he often takes over the sun god's duties in later myths. The Clown, the Farmer, and the Pig. There was a certain wealthy man, a prominent citizen, who was about to sponsor a public entertainment. He invited anyone who had something new to perform, promising to pay them a fee. Professional performers came to compete for public acclaim, and among them was a clown known for his sophisticated sense of humor. He claimed that he had a performance unlike anything ever seen in any theater before. The news quickly spread throughout the city, and the public's interest grew. Theater seats that had been empty just before were now not enough to accommodate the crowd. After the clown appeared alone on stage, without any props or assistance, the audience fell silent in eager anticipation. Then the clown suddenly lowered his head toward his chest and mimicked the sound of a little pig. The sound was so realistic that the audience was convinced there must be a real pig hidden under his cloak. They demanded that he shake out the cloak to reveal the pig. When the cloak was shaken out and nothing was found, the audience applauded loudly, and the clown left the stage to cheers. A country bumpkin saw what happened and said, "By gosh, I can do better than that." He immediately promised to perform the same trick the next day, only better. The crowd grew even larger, and by then, favoritism had already taken hold of their minds. It was clear that they had come not so much to watch the performance, but to make fun of it. The two men appeared on stage. The clown squeaked as he had the day before, and the audience clapped and cheered. Then it was the farmer's turn. He pretended to hide a pig under his clothes. This time, however, there really was a pig hidden there. He pulled the pig's ear, causing it to squeal in pain. The audience shouted that the clown's performance was far more realistic and began to shout for the farmer to leave the stage. But the farmer then pulled the pig out from under his cloak and showed it to the audience, exposing their mistake. "Here," he said, "this little pig proves what kind of judges you are." In their groundless favoritism, people often make mistakes. They stand behind a judgment made in error until the actual fact of the matter later compels them to regret their choice. 528. The Bald Men and the Comb. A bald man happened to find a comb lying in the street. Another man, also bald, approached him and said, "Hey, you must share whatever you found." The first man showed him the comb and said, "The will of the gods was on our side, but fate must have a grudge against us. As the saying goes, we've found lumps of coal, not gold." This complaint suits anyone whose high hopes have been deceived. 529. Princeps of Flute. A flute player nicknamed Princeps was well known for accompanying the dancer Bathyllus. During a performance, the stage machinery malfunctioned, causing Princeps to fall and break his left leg. He was carried off stage, moaning in pain. After several months of recovery, theatergoers missed Princeps. A prominent citizen organizing a show persuaded Princeps to make an appearance. As Princeps arrived at the theater, rumors spread about his return. When the curtain opened, there was a thunderous sound effect, and the traditional invocation to the gods was made, as was customary in Roman theatres. Then the chorus sang an unfamiliar song with the refrain, "Rejoice, O Rome, you are safe now that the princeps is well." The audience stood and applauded. Princeps, misunderstanding, blew kisses to the crowd, thinking they were cheering his recovery. The front row realized Princeps's mistake and laughed, demanding an encore. Princeps prostrated himself on stage, further confusing the audience. Eventually, everyone understood the error. Princeps, dressed all in white with a bandaged leg, was thrown off the stage to universal approval. He had mistakenly claimed the honours meant for Caesar, Rome's true princeps. This tale illustrates how a person's vanity can lead to public humiliation when they overestimate their own importance. Note, princeps is one of the titles used to refer to Caesar, and later became a title for emperors. The celebratory song about his recovery likely refers to the event in 48 BC, when Caesar was severely injured in his left arm during the Battle of Dyrrhachium, but later recovered. Opportunity. Running swiftly, balancing on a razor's edge, bald with a lock of hair on his forehead, he is naked. If you catch him from the front, you might hold him, but once he has passed, even Jupiter cannot catch him again. This represents opportunity, the brief moment when things are possible. The ancients created this image of time so that our efforts would not be hindered by laziness or hesitation. 531. The Bull and the Calf. A bull, struggling with his horns, could barely fit through the narrow doorway to his stable. A young calf, eager to help, suggested how the bull should turn his head. "Be quiet," said the bull. "I knew how to do this before you were even born." Whoever tries to correct a wiser person thinks too highly of himself. 532. The Old Dog and His Master. There was once a dog who had been quick and strong when fighting all kinds of wild animals. He never failed to do what his master asked, always succeeding in his tasks. But as time passed, he began to weaken under the weight of old age. One day he was sent to fight a wild boar. The dog grabbed the boar by the ear, but his old decaying teeth couldn't hold on to the prey, and it escaped. The hunter, upset, scolded the dog. The old dog, in response, said to the man, "It is not my spirit that has failed, but my strength. Praise me for what I once was, even if you must scold me for what I am now." Philetus, you can clearly understand the meaning of this story. High 533. The Monkey and the Fox. A monkey asked the fox to give him part of her tail to cover his bare behind decently. The fox, with malice, replied, "Even if my tail grew longer than it is now, I would rather drag it through mud and thorns than give you even a small part of it." 534. Mercury and the Two Women. Once Mercury was a guest in the home of two women who received him in a rude and stingy manner. One of the women was a mother with an infant still in his cradle, while the other was a prostitute. As he was about to leave, Mercury paused at the doorway and said, "You are looking upon a god. I will grant each of you one wish." The mother pleaded, "Let me see my son grow a beard as soon as possible." The prostitute asked, "Let anything I touch follow me." Mercury flew away, and the women went back inside. To their shock, they found the baby wailing with a full-grown beard. The sight made the prostitute laugh so hard that her nose filled with snot, as sometimes happens. She reached up to wipe it away, but as soon as she touched her nose, it stretched downward, following her hand until it dragged along the floor. Thus, the woman who laughed at another ended up being laughed at herself. 5. Prometheus and Truth. Prometheus, the potter who shaped the new age of humanity, once decided to sculpt a statue of truth. He worked with great skill, aiming to create a figure that would guide people's actions. However, just as he was finishing his work, mighty Jupiter suddenly summoned him. Before leaving, Prometheus entrusted his workshop to Trickery, a recent apprentice among the gods. Seizing the opportunity, Trickery, driven by ambition, used his cunning hands to craft a second statue, identical in size and appearance to Truth. His imitation was nearly perfect, but as he was about to finish, he ran out of clay for its feet. At that moment, Prometheus returned. Startled and afraid, Trickery quickly sat back in his seat. Prometheus was amazed at how closely the two statues resembled each other. Wanting to claim credit for both, he placed them in the kiln together. Once they were thoroughly baked, he breathed life into them. Sacred Truth stepped forward with steady, measured steps, while her incomplete twin remained stuck in place. This counterfeit figure, born of deception, became known as falsehood. And so, as many say, falsehood has no feet. Lies may sometimes gain traction at first, but in the end, truth always prevails. Oracle of Apollo, Phoebus Apollo, who dwells in Delphi and resides on beautiful Parnassus, I beg you to reveal what is best for us. At these words, the hair of the sacred priestess suddenly stood on end. The tripods shook, and religion roared from the inner sanctuary. The laurels trembled, and even the day grew pale. Struck by the god's power, the Pythian priestess spoke. Listen, nations, to Apollo's counsel. Honor piety and fulfill your vows to the gods. Defend your homeland, parents, children, and faithful wives with arms. Drive away enemies with the sword. Support friends and show mercy to the unfortunate. Favor the good and confront the deceitful. Punish crimes and rebuke the impious. Penalize those who defile marriage beds with shameful adultery. Beware of evildoers, and trust no one too much. Having uttered these words, the virgin priestess collapsed in a frenzy. Indeed, she was frenzied, for her words were spoken in vain. 7. Aesop and the writer. A man had read to Aesop parts of a poorly written book in which the author foolishly boasted at length about how great a writer he was. Curious about Aesop's opinion, the man asked him, "Surely you don't think I am too proud of myself? My confidence in my own genius is not misplaced, is it?" "Not at all," Aesop replied, clearly exhausted by the writer's terrible book. "I think it's a very good idea for you to praise yourself, since no one else will ever do it for you." 538. Pompey and his soldier. One of Pompey's soldiers was a large, muscular man, but he spoke in a high-pitched voice and walked with a feminine gait, which led many to believe he was effeminate. One night he set an ambush for Pompey's baggage train, luring away the mules and stealing a large amount of silver, gold, and clothing. The news of the theft quickly spread throughout the camp. The soldier was arrested and brought before General Pompey, who asked, "What do you have to say for yourself? Did you rob me, comrade?" The soldier immediately spat into his left hand, flicked the spittle off his fingers, and swore, "Commander, may my eyes melt like this spittle if I ever saw or touched anything of yours." Pompey, being a trusting man, couldn't believe this soldier had the courage to commit such a crime. He ordered the man to be dismissed as a disgrace to the regiment. Not long after, an enemy soldier challenged the Romans to a duel, confident he would win. The Roman soldiers were fearful for their lives, and the officers were uncertain what to do. The soldier, who had appeared effeminate, but was as strong as Mars himself, approached one of the officers and asked in a trembling voice, "May I?" Pompey, enraged by the situation, ordered the soldier to be thrown out. However, one of Pompey's old friends advised, "It's better to test this man who is dispensable than to risk the life of a valuable warrior whose loss could be used against you as proof of recklessness." Pompey agreed and allowed the soldier to accept the challenge. To the amazement of all, the soldier swiftly beheaded his opponent. Pompey then said, "Soldier, I gladly award you the victor's crown for avenging the honor of the Roman forces. But may my eyes melt like this." Pompey mimicked the gesture the soldier had used when swearing his oath. "If you weren't the one who stole my baggage train the other night." Venus and the hen. When Juno boasted of her chastity, Venus did not want to argue with her. However, for fun and to pass the time, Venus decided to interpret the words of a hen. So she asked a hen that was in her house. "Tell me," Venus asked the hen, "how much food would be enough to satisfy you?" The hen replied, "Whatever you give me will be enough, as long as you let me use my feet to scratch for more." Venus asked, "Would a peck of wheat be enough to stop you from scratching?" "Oh, that's more than enough," said the hen, "but please let me keep scratching." "Then," Venus asked, "what would it take for you to stop scratching completely?" At that moment, the hen admitted her weakness. "Even if I had access to an entire barn of grain, I would still keep scratching." Juno is said to have laughed at Venus's joke, because through the hen, Venus had made a statement about all women in general. Note, in Latin, the title of the poem expressing the dialogue between Venus and the hen is referred to as the lust of women. 540. The old bull and the young bull. A father had a cruel son. When out of his father's sight, the son would severely beat the slaves and indulge in his fiery youth. Aesop therefore briefly told the father this story. A farmer once yoked an old bull to a young one. The old bull, trying to avoid the uneven yoke, pleaded that his strength had weakened with age. The farmer said to him, "Don't worry, I'm not doing this to make you work, but to tame that young bull. He has crippled many others with his kicks and horns. Likewise, unless you keep that son constantly by your side and temper his fiery nature with gentleness, beware that greater complaints may arise in your household." Kindness is the remedy for cruelty. Aesop and the athlete. Aesop, the wise man from Phrygia, once saw an athlete who had won a contest and was boasting loudly about it. Aesop asked him, "Was your opponent stronger than you?" The athlete replied, "Don't talk nonsense. I was far stronger than he was." Aesop responded, "You fool! What kind of honor do you deserve if you, being the stronger one, defeated a weaker opponent? You might have earned my respect if your opponent had been stronger and you had to use your skill to overcome him." 542. The donkey and the lyre. A donkey saw a lyre lying in a field. He approached it and tried to strum the strings with his hoof. The strings sounded as he touched them. "What a beautiful thing," said the donkey, "but completely useless, since I don't know anything about music. If only someone more skilled had found it, my ears would have been delighted by heavenly melodies." So it is that talents often go to waste due to some misfortune. 543. The widow and her lover. A woman had lost her beloved husband of many years and had buried his body in the ground. She could not be torn away from his grave and spent her days weeping. People praised her as a model of a faithful wife. Meanwhile, some men who had plundered the temple of Jupiter were sentenced to death for their crime against the god. After they were crucified, soldiers were stationed by the crosses so that the families of the executed criminals could not recover their bodies. This happened near the tomb where the woman had secluded herself. One night, one of the guards, feeling thirsty, asked the woman's maidservant to bring him some water. The maid had just been helping her mistress prepare for bed, as the widow had stayed awake late into the night, keeping vigil by the light of a lamp. The door was slightly open, and when the soldier peeked inside, he saw a woman of exceptional beauty. He was immediately captivated and filled with lust. Gradually, a strong desire grew within him, and he found countless reasons to visit the widow again and again. Over time, the widow became more and more inclined toward her guest, and soon their bond grew stronger. While the guard spent his nights in the widow's embrace, one of the bodies from the crosses was stolen. The soldier was disturbed by this and told the widow what had happened. The woman, ever composed, said, "Don't worry." With these words, she handed over her husband's body to be nailed to the cross again, so the soldier would not be punished for neglecting his duty. Thus, corruption takes hold even in places of great reputation. The bride and the two grooms. Two young men were in love with the same woman. The wealthy young man won her heart, as the poor man had nothing to offer but his good name and good looks. When the wedding day arrived, the heartbroken lover could not bear the pain and secluded himself in his country home just outside the city. His home was located near the grand mansion of the rich man, the future home of the bride, who was about to leave her mother's care forever. The groom's house in the city was not large enough for the occasion, so the wedding procession began with a large crowd of guests in attendance, and Hymen, the god of marriage, leading the way with a torch in his hand. There was also a donkey standing at the gate, regularly rented out by the poor man, and it so happened that the bride's family had decided to hire this donkey so she wouldn't hurt her feet on the rough road. At that moment, Venus, the goddess of love, showed her mercy. The winds stirred the clouds, and a crack of thunder shook the heavens. Dark night descended, bringing a heavy downpour, and the light was taken from everyone's eyes. Terrified guests ran in all directions, seeking shelter from the storm. Meanwhile, the donkey, finding refuge under a familiar roof nearby, announced its arrival with a loud hee-haw. The household slaves rushed out and were astonished to see a beautiful young woman in the wagon. They quickly informed their master, who was reclining at the table with a few friends, trying to drown his sorrow with wine. When he heard what had happened, he rejoiced at this unexpected turn of events. Encouraged by Bacchus and Venus, he joyfully completed the wedding ceremony, applauded by his companions. The bride's family sent the town crier to search for her, while the former groom mourned his runaway bride. When word of the event spread, the public praised the goodwill of the gods. 545. Aesop and his ugly mistress. Aesop was once the slave of an ugly woman who spent entire days applying makeup. Despite her fine clothes, pearls, silver and gold, no one would even touch her. "May I say a few words?" asked Aesop. "Go ahead," she replied. "I believe you could achieve all your desires," Aesop said, "if only you would set aside this finery." "Do you truly think I look better without all this?" she asked. "Quite the opposite," Aesop replied. "But if you give away your jewelry, your bed will get some rest." "You're going to break every bone in your body," she shouted, and ordered her slaves to whip the insolent Aesop. Soon after, a thief stole one of her silver bracelets. When she was told it was missing, the mistress was furious and called all the slaves. She threatened them with severe punishments if they didn't tell her the truth. "Threaten the others," Aesop said, "but you're not fooling me, my mistress. It's because I spoke the truth that you had me whipped." 546. The Rooster and the Cats. A rooster had cats carry him as his bearers. When a fox saw the rooster being carried around proudly, she said to him, "I warn you to beware of treachery. If you look at the faces of those cats, you'll see they're not carrying a burden, but transporting prey." Later, when the group of cats began to feel hungry, they tore their master apart and divided his remains among themselves. Excessive confidence often leads people into danger. 547. The Sow and the Wolf. A pregnant sow lay groaning, about to give birth. A wolf hurried over and offered to help, saying he could act as a midwife and assist with the delivery. However, the sow, sensing the wicked intentions in the wolf's heart, rejected his offer. She told him, "It is enough if you just stay far away." Had she trusted the treacherous wolf, she would have found herself in even greater pain, mourning not just the agony of childbirth, but her own doom. It is wise to judge a person's character before entrusting yourself to their care. A slave fleeing from his harsh master encountered Aesop, known to him from the neighborhood. "Why are you so troubled?" Aesop asked. "I'll tell you plainly, father, for you deserve to be called by that name, as my complaints can be safely entrusted to you," the slave replied. "I endure constant beatings and lack of food. I'm often sent to the farm without provisions for the journey. If the master dines at home, I must stand by all night. If he's invited out, I lie in the gutter until dawn. I've earned my freedom, yet I serve with grey hair. If I were guilty of any wrongdoing, I would bear it silently. But I'm never given enough to eat, and I suffer under a cruel master. For these reasons, and others too long to list, I've decided to go wherever my feet may take me." Aesop responded, "Listen to this. If you face such hardships without having done wrong, as you say, what do you think will happen to you now that you've actually committed an offence?" With this advice, Aesop deterred the slave from his escape plan. Do not make a bad situation worse. 549. The Horse and the Miller. Old age befell a horse, and he was sent to work at a mill instead of going to battle. Forced to grind grain instead of fighting, he lamented his current fate, remembering his past glory. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen," the horse lamented. "Listen, Miller, I once served on the battlefield, my body adorned with armor, and a man attended to me as my groom. Now, I don't know what has become of me, but here I am, stuck at this mill instead of in combat." The miller replied, "Enough of your endless talk about the past, for fortune knows how to bring change to mortals in both directions." The Bear and the Crabs. When supplies run low for the bear in the woods, he runs to the rocky shore and grabs a stone. He slowly lowers his hairy legs into the shallow water. As soon as crabs cling to his fur, he jumps onto dry land and shakes off the sea's bounty. He then enjoys the food he has cleverly gathered all over his legs. This story shows how hunger can sharpen the wit, even of the foolish. Hunger sharpens the mind of living beings. The Raven and the Traveller. A man was walking through the countryside on a remote path when he heard someone say, "Hello, He paused briefly, but seeing no one, he quickened his pace. Soon after, he heard the same greeting again. Encouraged by the friendly voice, he stopped, hoping to meet whoever had spoken. The traveller stood there confused for a while, wasting time he could have spent covering another mile or more. Finally, a raven appeared, flying overhead and repeatedly croaking, "Hello, hello!" Realizing he had been fooled, the man exclaimed, "Curse you, you wretched bird! You've made me delay when I was in a hurry." People are often deceived by words. 5552. The Lizard and the Snake. A snake happened to catch a lizard from behind. As the snake opened its wide mouth to swallow the lizard grabbed a small twig lying nearby. Holding the twig sideways firmly between its teeth, the lizard cleverly blocked the snake's greedy mouth. Thus the snake failed to capture its prey, and the lizard escaped. Where strength fails, one must use cunning.